Welcome to Alpha Kappa Psi's webinar titled A Path to Building Brotherhood. My name is Mackenzie Lauka, and I serve AK Psi as the Associate Director of Education. I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics regarding the audio and web-based features of today's program. In order to verify attendance, you should have linked the GoToWebinar meeting room through the web link provided in your confirmation email. To access the PowerPoint handout, click the plus sign next to Handouts on your screen. Click the name of the handout to download the file so you can follow along. This webinar will be advanced remotely. At the end of the program, I'll explain how you can ask a question to our presenter. If you have a question throughout the program, feel free to type it into the question box on your screen or tweet it using the hashtag AKPsiChat. Your questions will be asked at the end of the program in the order they are received. After the webinar has ended, a link to the recording will be emailed to you so you can review the webinar at a later point. Be sure to also check out our social media content. You may also find some valuable resources on the AK Psi blog, Facebook page, Instagram feed, LinkedIn page, Twitter feed, and our YouTube channel, all of which can be accessed from the akpsi.org homepage. The heart of the membership experience isn't based on the meetings attended or number of events you plan, but on the relationships you gain and the brotherhood that is formed. Reflecting on her own experiences, the former president of the Alpha Phi chapter is going to share how her chapter battled a lack of brotherhood and how they're able to transform the culture into an overall better membership experience. In addition to covering these topics, we'll leave time for your questions and comments on the subject matter. For our program today, we have one presenter who's going to provide guidance and support while also provoking thoughts and awareness so you walk away from today's program with new insight on the topic. At this point, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Rachel Bowden is a new alumni brother as she recently graduated from the Alpha Phi chapter at the University of Florida. She joined AK Psi in 2013 and served in many different roles in her chapter. She spent her last year as president of Alpha Phi. After graduation, she relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, and is currently working for Accenture as a management consulting analyst. To get started with the presentation, I'll hand it off to Rachel.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. So my goal for today is to share some of my own experiences in building brotherhood in my home chapter and hopefully give some suggestions on how your chapter could implement changes to build brotherhood as well. So to start, I just thought it would be good to pause and reflect on the theme of brotherhood for just a moment. We reference this a lot, right? It's one of our core values. And as pledges, we're told that brotherhood is this high ideal that we have to strive to embody. And then often, when we become brothers, we witness the breakdown of brotherhood. Whenever I travel to PBLI or convention and I get the chance to speak with brothers from different chapters from all over the world, I've found that this is something that most chapters do struggle with. Many chapters, especially large ones, struggle with battling the clique culture and apathy among their brothers. So how do we overcome this? How do we build brotherhood in our home chapters? Well, let's start by first defining brotherhood. And I don't know about you, but I've always found this difficult to do. So we can start by taking a look at the road to brotherhood, which talks extensively about brotherhood. It dictates that brotherhood means showing care for all members of the group with a dedication to serve fellow brother members when ordinarily one wouldn't lend assistance to the average person. So what does that mean? Well, to me it means that service is the center of our identity as members of AK Psi. We serve our members, and that's, everyone from our pledges to our brothers to our alumni. And we do this through embracing leadership and professional development and friendship. And then we take that and we go out and we serve our communities. So this is the heart of AK Psi, showing care for all members and serving them. And when this happens, chapters tend to succeed. Therefore, each chapter has a vested interest in building brotherhood therein. What is also emphasized in the road to brotherhood is that there is no formula for building brotherhood, and it definitely cannot be established overnight. So tonight, I'm going to share Alpha Phi's recent journey towards Brotherhood. And this doesn't necessarily mean that what worked for Alpha Phi is automatically going to work for your chapter. Instead, I encourage you after this webinar to go assess your chapter and together as brothers have meaningful conversations, and I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. So I first want to start by setting the scene of the Alpha Phi chapter that I was initiated into and how that was my motivation for wanting to change this. We had, at the time in 2013, 180 brothers in our chapter, and a culture that, like many chapters, was centered on drinking and giving pledges a hard time and a lack of unity overall. There was drama on e-board and drama in committees and drama between brothers, and as a result, the chapter that I inherited was plagued with baggage, and it felt as if we were paying for the sin, so to speak, of older brothers who made poor choices. Of the 7 semesters that I was a member of the chapter, we were under investigation for all but 2. This created a distant feeling between our brothers and AKSI as an international organization. It also created the sense that we needed to hide our fun. Many brothers became upset and disinterested because they could no longer have fun, right? So after the second investigation, the Alpha Phi chapter officially entered a probationary period that required our chapter to be dry, meaning we were restricted from having alcohol at any fraternity event. And for us, this was a huge shock. Prior to this, almost every chapter event, except for maybe a few professional development ones, was centered around drinking, and that was the only way that we knew how to build brotherhood. So the result, because of these terms of being a dry chapter, no one was bonding anymore. The feeling that alcohol was the only way to connect with our other brothers, it didn't just affect our individual relationships, but it extended deeper into the chapter. Brothers didn't want to get involved, they didn't want to hold positions, and they didn't want to go to events. Cliques became a real problem as people weren't forming new friendships, but instead they were sticking close to their pledge classes and their families. So in summary, the chapter that we inherited was a pretty sad scene and lacking unity and brotherhood. And that's a pretty big deal when you consider that's 2 of our 5 core values. So as a younger brother, I never really felt that I could change anything in our chapter. It seemed like I had no voice and that our chapter would always be this sad and this disengaged. But then when I was elected to executive board in my junior year, and that was the semester that we started on our probationary period, I finally felt that I could speak my mind. As chapter morale was rapidly declining and brothers were leaving left and right, our e-board realized that we had no choice but to take action. And we put our heads together, and what we came up with was Brotherhood Retreat. So the purpose of this event was to unite brothers in building a common vision for the chapter for the following year, as well as give emerging leaders the chance to develop their voice and find their places in the chapter. We knew that meaningful conversations were key to achieving any level of success. Driving positive change was impossible without the buy-in from each member of the chapter. And we had to give each brother a chance to speak their mind and play a role in developing our chapter's direction in the future. We knew that having these conversations would lead to an open and honest relationships among our brothers. And a Brotherhood retreat could be the setting to start that change. Now, we'd had Brotherhood retreats in the past, but they were filled with activities that no one liked. The overall feeling was that unity events were dry and therefore not fun. So no one would ever attend them. We knew that if we were going to convince brothers to give up a weekend to devote to building unity, that this event had to be different. We would have to create an actual fun, engaging event and that people would want to attend, or else nothing else would change. So the first step to our event, which if you're thinking about how you can plan an event in your chapter, this should be the first step in your journey to creating your event, and that's planning. So this is the most important step in creating an event to target specific goals of the retreat. We started by simply asking questions. Why do brothers typically not enjoy our unity events? What are the concerns that our brothers have that cause low retention? What activities could our brothers want to participate in? And after asking these questions, we started to form ideas of what our retreat would become. So let's move and start talking about logistics. So first, we decided that we wanted our event to be overnight. We knew that there were a lot of things that we wanted to cover, and that it would take more than a few hours to get our brothers to open up about these topics. So we rented cabins for brothers to sleep in at a park near our campus. And we knew it would be difficult to have many brothers attend if it lasted too long. So we kept the entire event to be about 24 hours. Our event started Saturday at noon, and our brothers carpooled, they grabbed lunch, brought it to the campsite, and this is also a great way to cut down on costs. The event then went through the night with coordinated activities going to about 11:30 in the evening. And we were lucky enough to have a mess hall at the camp that provided us with food for dinner. But if you don't have that option, grilling burgers and hot dogs, and that's really fun and easy as well. The next morning, we had a few closing activities after breakfast, and then the brothers were sent home by 10 a.m., and this worked really well for us and gave us just enough time to cover what we needed to cover, still keeping the event fun, but we didn't lose the attention of our brothers. So aside from the logistics, we also had to consider format. We knew that it couldn't just be the executive board members leading these conversations. One aspect we decided to utilize during retreat was small group discussions and to delegate part of the responsibility to other brothers. So we called these small group discussions bro groups. And each bro group had a leader, which our planning committee had handpicked ahead of time. We chose brothers who were not current or past e-board, but who we believed would be able to step up and lead the conversation. Coming from a huge chapter, we also made sure to choose leaders from different friend groups of the chapter and asked them to encourage their closest AK-Psi friends to attend. This helped get many of our brothers to sign up. The more brothers you get to buy into the event, the better. You never want there to be only one person that knows what's going on. And having these group leaders allowed more people to get involved in the lesson, and it made it work for everyone. We also strategically placed brothers in bro groups based on personality. So you don't want to put the shy brother in the same group as the brother that won't stop talking, because the point is to give everybody a voice. So you have to strategically place brothers who you know will complement each other in the conversations. Over the course of the retreat, group leaders would then lead discussions based on handouts that we provided them. So they also helped in boosting morale of the group and getting people excited for different activities. And we made sure to promote this event as a dry event with no drinking allowed. And that's really important. And we had to share that way ahead of time so people had realistic expectations going into the retreat. As we started discussing the activities and the flow for the retreat on the planning committee, there were some topics that instantly rose to the top that we knew we needed to cover. And this included specific items ranging from our chapter's families to the importance of rituals, and also open-ended topics such as our chapter's purpose and its strengths and its weaknesses. For perspective, most brothers seem to hate attending rituals in the Alpha Phi chapter because they were boring, or at least they seemed like they were, because they were becoming dry, and additionally, many of our family activities had fizzled away. In the past, our families were the people that you hung out with socially, so we wanted to integrate families more into our chapter. So one activity we did was we broke out into families and had a challenge of who could draw back their family tree the most generations. And we gave nicknames to those brothers who had never gotten one. In relation to the rituals, we had the opportunity to read through the writing in the rituals, and we found meaning in it. We thought about how we could further engage our brothers in the ritual, and we picked out our favorite parts, and we discussed why certain lines or certain words resonated with us, what they meant to us. And these were just a few of the activities we did, but they helped to allow everyone to get involved and share their perspectives. have some fun with topics that might not be the most entertaining. When we touched on what our purpose was as a chapter, we had a lot of unanswered questions. Are we here to serve our brothers, our school, the future pledges? Where was our chapter heading? And how are we supposed to differentiate ourselves? Did our current structure allow for us to reach the goals that we wanted? Why didn't people want to hold positions? And what could chapter leadership be doing better? And how could we bring more value to becoming a brother? How could we overcome our status of being on probation? And how could we ensure that we were never, ever on probation again? And again, there's no right answer. And you have to be open to what brothers want to talk about and where they take the conversation. So after dinner, we had one final big group discussion talking about the greatest strength of our chapter versus the biggest challenges. And we debated topics, and we made a list of short-term versus long-term goals that we wanted to implement. So some short-term goals were like creating a no laptop rule during committee reports so that we could better support our brothers who had to go stand up in the brother meetings and give their report. Or we created changes in our ritual to get brothers more involved while still obviously abiding by the risk management policies. Long-term goals included making changes to the way that we portrayed ourselves to pledges and working on the curtain drop, so to speak. So we use this term in Alpha Phi. The curtain drop refers to the reality that hits pledges when they become brothers, and that's when they realize that this image of this seemingly perfect and professional and cohesive brotherhood that they idolize during pledging, it breaks down once they enter the brotherhood. And this can be really hard as a pledge to see this breakdown of the image that you saw of the brothers, and we wanted to change that. This conversation, obviously, it got very heated, and it lasted 2 hours, and brothers, we couldn't get them to stop sharing. After our action plan had been made, and non-executive board brothers had even taken ownership of each item in the action plan, we then proceeded to our final activity of the night, which we call I Love You Like a Brother. So I Love You Like a Brother took place over a campfire, obviously with s'mores, because what is a campfire without s'mores? And it's very relaxed, yet very personal. We share with each other personal accounts of how a brother has impacted our life, starting with, hey, Michael, I love you like a brother. You've done this, and I really appreciate it. This is a chance for our brothers to share their own witnesses of how different chapter members had impacted them. We heard everything from, hey, when I was a pledge, and I was so close to quitting AK Psi because I was so overwhelmed and I felt like no one cared. But you were the one brother that came up to me that day and asked if you could help. And we also heard things like, I love you like a brother because you say the things at meetings that aren't always popular, but they need to be said. And you rarely get support, so thank you. And cue the hugs, the tears, the laughs. So after this event, the retreat was basically over for the day, but many brothers opted to stay up all night playing board games and continuing to develop their brotherhood naturally. We also had a small activity in the back of the main room, and this is the photo that you probably see on the slide, and that was when brothers could write a small note and place it into the mailbox of another brother that was attending, and we encouraged brothers to write encouraging notes to one another so they could bring it home after the event. And this ended up being probably one of the most special aspects of our event, a way to recognize those brothers that are special to you. And the next morning, we had coffee, pastries, and we simply reviewed everything that we had talked about the night before. We solidified some ideas from our action plan and ended the only way you can ever end an NKSI event, with our anthem. We were fired up. We were excited to bring everything back to the rest of our chapter. So the results of the event were incredible. We had 40 people in attendance, which fast forward to 2015 when we first did this. This was about a third of our brotherhood. Our first meeting back, a lot of non-e-board brothers presented the ideas from the Brotherhood retreat back to the other brothers. And some of these actions that they proposed were the shift for our Master of Rituals to being not as hidden and mysterious from pledges, because this is an idea that had its roots back in the hazing days, and we thought that it contributed to the curtain drop. Another item on our action list was requesting that brothers not use laptops during meetings. And we also requested that they sit in the front, because for some reason every meeting, all the brothers always want to sit in the back of the room. Other action items were looking closely into rituals and integrating more brothers into those rituals. So we started and incorporated the secret handshake into our rituals. We also had new ideas for events to build unity among brothers. And another request that came, and this is something that the coordinators of the event didn't foresee, but something that came from the retreat, was the request that bro groups were brought to all the brothers and used in meetings each week. So they liked the fact that they had a voice in Brotherhood Retreat, and they wanted to extend that into our weekly meetings when we started to discuss difficult topics. The feedback was amazing. Many of our brothers said that this is the best event they had ever attended, and our chapter really was on fire. New leaders emerged to continue the tradition, and some new brothers even went on to create a different Brotherhood event for the fall semester called Back to Brotherhood. This event involves spending one afternoon reconnecting after the summer and refreshing our memory on our goals for the year. And this was also a great event filled with games, food, fun, and accomplished similar goals as Brotherhood Retreat. If you're interested in that, you can email me. You'll have that at the end of the webinar, and you can ask. So since the first Brotherhood Retreat that we held in 2015, I've noticed two very apparent outcomes of the event. The first was a newfound respect for our brothers. The way we talked about brothers during meetings and the way we discussed pledges. We realized that once an individual becomes a pledge, they deserve the respect and they should be treated as if they're already a brother. And this concept soon became the norm. We now strive to have a zero tolerance for disrespect, and we often use our out-of-order ruling in meetings for anyone that violates that. This directly relates to our newfound ability to discuss difficult topics at meetings, but to do so respectfully. The other outcome was a new group of leaders of AK Psi that have been brought into the chapter that respects their voice. Unlike my pledge class and those before me, where young brothers never felt empowered to share their perspectives, our chapter now works to foster new voices that challenge the status quo among the chapter. And as always, debate leads to those meaningful conversations, and those have the potential to lead to great change. As I mentioned in the title, our Brotherhood Retreat was simply a path to building brotherhood. And you know, the Alpha Phi chapter still has a lot of work to do, but this was a huge step in the right direction. And as we all know, building brotherhood doesn't happen overnight. These are types of events that need to happen constantly, every year, every semester, by renewing our pride and goals as a chapter, semester after semester, and by creating ideas that generate success in our chapter. Brothers slowly have started to change their idea about what brotherhood is. After 2 years as a dry chapter, we were able to build a commitment to our fraternity that was deeper than drinking, which had not always been the case. We literally learned to love each other as brothers and not as friends only. This isn't to say that there's anything wrong with having a drink with brothers who are 21. It's simply just the idea that drinking doesn't have to be the center of your chapter culture to enjoy bringing a brother of AK Psi. In many ways, though, it cut down on the drama, the conduct problems, and the overall risk of our chapter. It forced us to realign with the goals of the entire fraternity. So now I'm going to transition. I've kind of talked about the event that we put on, our Brotherhood Retreat, but I'm going to now go into some tips for planning a similar event. So first, when planning events like these, there are 3 critical aspects. So there's the marketing, there's the planning, and there's the debriefing. We're going to talk about each of these. When it comes to marketing these events, the language that you use is so important. So if you go into a brother meeting and say, we're going to spend all day outside playing games and bonding, brothers may not be too interested. With the same token, saying we're going to spend 24 hours talking about intense brotherhood themes, brothers may not be too excited either. Instead, talk about what you want each individual to experience at your event. For us, it was a forum to hear their ideas and concerns and a time to reconnect with why they joined and why they loved AKSI. And it was a time to make changes in the direction of the chapter. So that's how we marketed it. Make it sound exciting and get those peppy people to announce it at the brother meeting. Have a slideshow showing the location, have a packing list, and of course, you have to market if there's going to be food. Now to talk about planning. When planning these events, you have to plan out every single detail. You should remember that the brothers attending these events are in many ways your guests. You must think about making them feel comfortable in every way, from making sure you're equipped with the proper supplies to making sure that the activities are engaging for everyone. So we brought things like extra water, extra snacks. We brought bug spray. We brought games for at night. We brought sunscreen, tissues. I think this is one thing that really set us up for success through being prepared. When choosing activities, also make sure you're choosing things that everyone will enjoy. We found that people don't like to spend a million hours doing icebreakers, and they also don't like to do things that embarrass them too much. We were sensitive to that when choosing the activities that we did. And we also made sure to alternate between games and bonding activities and discussion so that the day is dynamic and flowing. You don't want your brothers to get too tired of playing games, but you also don't want them to get bored of discussion. So keep it dynamic. We also engaged brother groups by appointing bro group leaders who led the discussion in bro groups. And so these bro group leaders had met previously to Bro Retreat in order to make sure that it wasn't only the retreat lead who knew what was going on, but it was also those leaders who had a stake in making sure the discussions were fruitful and targeted. So this also allows you to control the way the conversations go, making sure that each group touches on certain predetermined themes. Finally, having bro group leaders can also allow you to have someone taking notes during the discussions of each of the groups. I recommend meeting with the group leaders after the event and to debrief. So what was the feedback of the brothers? What did they enjoy? What didn't they? What topics need more time to discuss, perhaps in a brother meeting or a focus group? Which topics failed to engage brothers altogether and why? Which activities would you recommend for the next event? Which would you never do again? And you should write these things down so that the next event coordinator can understand your perspective. And all of this can go in your planning guide. And this is the way to make sure that the same amount of intention goes into each event that you plan year after year, because you don't want to have the same conversation. So make sure you record which conversations you've had. Also, always have backup activities planned. Sometimes discussions run ahead of schedule, and you'll need to be able to adjust to that. Brothers should never be sitting for more than 15 minutes or so with nothing to do unless it's planned downtime. Have a detailed schedule and be aware of the crowd. If you see everyone's becoming disengaged and yawning in a lengthy conversation, then feel free to take a break and readdress it later. Go out of your way to show that you've thought about your brothers, and perhaps have your bro group leaders write encouraging notes to members of the group. You can decorate the room with AKSI gear. You can and play music. Make the event full of energy. And the key is to have everything planned to the smallest detail, but always remember to remain flexible because something always goes wrong. Perhaps the most difficult aspect, though, of the event is following up with a similar event the following year. I kind of touched on that. It's crucial to these events so they don't get repetitive. You cannot have the same discussions year after year. This is something that is the new challenge for Alpha Psi. How can we find new conversations to have to better our chapter? Before each Brotherhood event, whether it's a retreat, a day activity, whatever it is, it needs to be planned with the same amount of intention. No chapter is exactly the same year after year, and you can choose to address different topics based on the current state of your chapter. So for example, if you feel like your chapter has a difficult time abiding with risk management policies, then talk about it. Have those meaningful conversations. Topics could include, why do brothers consistently break these policies? What could the e-board be doing to better address the issues? You can even do a cost-benefit analysis. What are the potential outcomes if the chapter continues down a path like this, breaking the risk management policies? Could it be an investigation, a probation, a suspension? And these are realities that I find brothers often don't really understand. And so retreats are a great way to communicate that. My best advice, though, and I've said this again many times, is to plan and plan and plan and plan. Many new brothers fail to really ever connect with AKSI again after the semester that they pledged, and our goal with our Brotherhood retreat was to remind our brothers of how much positivity and joy comes from being a brother, and to remind them that the chapter is theirs to do amazing things with. So that's all I have today, so I'm going to hand it back off to Mackenzie. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel. That's a lot of really good information. And that is going to wrap up the content portion of the program. So now it's time that we want to hear from all of you listening around the world. The program is now open to your questions and comments. As stated earlier, feel free to submit your question via the questions box or on Twitter using the hashtag AKSciChat. Questions will be answered in the order they're received. Please be sure to introduce yourself and include your chapter or college and university when you ask a question. So the first question we have for you today, Rachel, is how would you recommend budgeting for this event?
Sure. From our first Brotherhood retreat, we didn't really have a lot of budget money allocated to the event, and so we ended up having to charge brothers about $20 a person. But it was actually in Bro Retreat, finally, that one of the topics discussed was how we allocated too much money towards social trips and not enough to our Brotherhood, building Brotherhood within. So the following year, we were able to actually send any brother who wanted to attend for free because we shifted our budget. And so I find that a budget is often a reflection of your priorities as a chapter. If 50% of your budget is going to social events, but brothers have to pay out of pocket to go to professional events or, or Brotherhood building events, and this is something that you probably need to reevaluate with your chapter.
Great. The next question we have is from Lauren. She wants to know, how do you market the idea of a Brotherhood retreat without it feeling like you're just bribing people with food?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that, you always have those people where food is going to get them in the door, right? We all have brothers like that. But there are also brothers, we all joined this fraternity for a reason. And I think for most of us, maybe pledging was one of the most special times where we felt like we were part of something greater. And I think if your chapter is, maybe it's at a plateau or it's just, you're having difficulty within your chapter, and I think the best way to market it is to be authentic. So say, I see these things, no one wants to go to these events, or we're having this problem. I want to talk about it. But also I want to have a lot of fun with you, and we're going to do these events, and it's going to be so great. And we have a goal of getting 60% of our brothers there. And I find if you continue to have those conversations, mark it for a long time. Put it on the calendar day one and say, we expect all of our brothers to be there because this is the event of the year. And I think that if you do that, that can also help in getting a good turnout.
Good. The next question we have is from Brian from Iota Pi. He says, did you and your e-board participate in the bro groups, or did you just walk around and let the other brothers in the chapter kind of be the focus of those discussions?
Sure. So I, at the time, I was on e-board, and this event kind of fell under my responsibility. So I was actually the event lead. So I was the one, the big discussions I led. And when I wasn't leading discussions, perhaps if there was a small group breakout, when the group leaders were doing it, I would kind of walk around and make sure everything was going well. But I think it was a challenge for Alpha Phi was that people saw e-board as this separated group, right? That they they're the ones that communicate with nationals. They're the ones that make all the decisions, and they don't care about the needs of the normal brothers, so to speak. And so it was really important. We actually made sure that e-board was there was one e-board member in each group, but the e-board member was not the leader. So we wanted, our president at the time, when this happened in 2015, she was just a regular participant in a group listening, to what the non-leadership role brothers were saying. And it ended up also really impacting e-board because it was kind of the first time in a long time that they were listening to what the new brothers had to say and to what those people who aren't in leadership positions were. So I say that as many people as you can get to participate in the conversations, the better, and really try to limit the people that are walking around because the more brothers that can participate, the better.
Great answer. That actually kind of leads a little bit into the next question is, who should plan the event?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So many chapters I think are structured a little differently. So just as I said before, all of us have different budgets, but a budget is often a reflection of your priorities as a chapter. So I also find that your e-board is also a reflection of your priorities as a chapter. So many chapters have VPs of service, professionalism, social, but I think it's kind of rare to come across a chapter that has a VP of Brotherhood, and this is what Alpha Phi has. So this is an important position in our chapter, but their sole role is to build Brotherhood in the chapter. And they do this by, coordinating the Brotherhood events. They do activities in the meetings to get people excited. And they also serve to kind of reach out to those brothers who are maybe a little disengaged or aren't participating. So I recommend that someone in this type of role should be leading the event. And I think the committees are the best to oversee because the more minds, the better.
Great. The next question we have is, what were some of the struggles that you had to face during the retreat?
Okay, so I would have to say that the biggest struggle we faced was ensuring probably that everybody's voices were being heard and that the conversation stayed constructive. So I think it's very easy for these tough conversations to turn into a big complaining session where everybody decides to get frustrated with each other or the current situation, or we're frustrated with risk management policies or whatever it is. So many times we'd have to interject in conversations to get the heated topic onto a constructive path. But another challenge was that we faced was, I think, following through with the retreat. So this whole chapter is bonded and united in the retreat, and then you go back into the real world, so to speak, and you try to share these ideas with other brothers, and you try to get them on board. And some of the ideas that we came up with worked, and we were able to implement. But there were others that took a little bit longer for the brothers who hadn't attended to kind of come on board with.
All right. Next question we have is from Caroline. She says, what would you recommend to do if you're having trouble with brothers participating or speaking up during the retreat?
Yeah, so that's, we were kind of worried about that in the beginning, surprisingly, especially because we'd separated, all of the cliques. They were dispersed. So we made sure to put people with people that we knew that they didn't usually hang out with. So we were a little worried that no one would get talking. And so what we did was you kind of frame your questions. You start the day, maybe the questions are a little more shallow. So the first thing we did was say, what semester did you pledge? What is the most embarrassing thing that happened to you at the pledge? And what was your favorite memory? Or what's the favorite event you've ever attended? Or something like that. And we'd literally go around the circle, and share that. And the bro group leaders would facilitate that. And then you do an activity as a team. And then you'd go back and have a conversation. What's your favorite thing about risk rules? And the bro group leader would, say, okay, person number one, what do you think? What's your answer? Person number two, and kind of facilitate that. And as the day goes on and they're spending time in these groups, the barriers fall, and they do it naturally. And there's really nothing that you can do, plan to make sure that happens other than giving them time to kind of answer easy questions first. Easy, yes, no questions, or what's your favorite this question, or, what's your least favorite this question. And then slowly you won't be able to get people to stop talking, which is the goal.
Good. What is one thing that you wish you would have done differently during your first retreat?
That's a great question. I'd have to say, first, I think that looking back, we could have marketed a little bit better or chosen a better weekend. A lot of our brothers, we only had a third of our brothers attend our initial retreat because there was a conflicting big event on campus that weekend. And so after that, we set a goal for the next year that we'd get 50% of our brothers to always attend this. And so I think that that's something that we wish we would have done better. Trying to get them to attend. But I think the other thing would be documenting discussions and taking better notes at the retreat. So this probably would have helped organize our post-retreat action plan, as well as assisted in planning for follow-up Brotherhood building events. So I think those are probably two things that we would have done a little bit differently.
Great. The next question we have is from Brian again, and he wants to know, how did you get the brothers that didn't attend the retreat to buy into the things that you guys had discussed at the retreat?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that has been, I think, one of the big challenges. It is a challenge. So we found that in the original retreat, we had a hard time getting seniors to come out, right? Because seniors are like, been here forever, graduating in 3 months, not really about spending a weekend, trying to make plans for next year because I'm not going to be here. So luckily, we really marketed towards those new leaders, the younger new brothers that were going to step up and become the future e-board. And so luckily, when we set our goals for the next year, a lot of the brothers that maybe weren't as on board, they graduated. And sometimes that really helps a lot of times, especially when you're trying to change a culture in your chapter. Nothing like graduations to change that. So, but I think another thing is continuing to have those conversations. So when we got back, we placed every other brother in a bro group, in the already existing bro groups, so we kept our leaders. And then we rediscussed some of the conversations, the big ones that we felt were very important. But at the end of the day, at the same time, when it comes to things that you as an e-board can control, so these are things like the way that you want to run rituals, or when it comes to maybe risk management, if your chapter struggles with that, there is kind of the end of the day, as leaders, as an e-board, after you hear kind of these discussions and you make the decisions as a big group, as e-board you have a responsibility to implement them. So, for example, the laptop policy, everybody who was at, we tried to implement that coming back, everybody who was at Bro Retreat was like all about, putting laptops down because we had discussed it. And of course we get back to the meeting and a lot of brothers were not excited about having to put down their laptops. And ultimately it had to, our president had to say, well, this is kind of the new rule and this is what we're going to do. And, after 2 weeks of people not liking it, after week 3, it kind of became expected. And so, it's a mix of having conversations with everybody else to get them on board, but then just making the changes and really sticking to them.
Great answer. We do only have a few questions left, so if you do have any other final questions, go ahead and submit them. The next one is going to be, how can this be beneficial to a chapter that may already have a pretty strong brotherhood?
Sure. So I love this question because I am convinced that there's no such thing as a perfect chapter, and I'm sure all of you agree. And each chapter definitely has areas of growth. So while some chapters might use a retreat like this to break down walls between brothers, others can use it to develop new programs or improve programs. So maybe your pledge program is really outdated and you don't even know why you tell pledges to do certain things for their requirements. Well, use a Brotherhood retreat to construct a new pledge program that that uses the PET manual and abides by policies. And so the key benefit of a retreat is just gaining buy-in from brothers. So you create this fun, relaxing, but also energetic atmosphere. And then you use that to create a plan that's going to propel your chapter forward. So, and this can be through, again, building relationships, building programming, or building structure. And having the majority of your chapter, I think, in the development of these items will allow for a greater chance of success in implementation. And just side note, remember, always enter the retreat or the event with a blank slate. So you should have a template to get the ball rolling, but let your brothers come up with the ideas for these new programs or these new initiatives. They're the ones that you need to be listening to.
Great answer. Not seeing any additional questions, so this is going to be the last question for the night. That's going to be, how can you initiate building Brotherhood during the recruitment process with the current brothers and the soon-to-be pledges?
Yeah, that's actually it's a great question because, I really think that recruitment is kind of the source of, how you talk about the curtain dropping, right? And you have your potential pledges and how you portray yourself and how you get your brothers to portray themselves. That's how those brothers are going to view the chapter. So it's really important, speaking of recruitment, to start having these conversations early. But I think that when in doubt, go back to the core values and go back to the purpose of AKSI. So, when you are recruiting, have some of your events talk about experiences, talk about how AKSI is changing, like some of these conversations, I love you like a brother. Why not invite, potential rushies, to join in those conversations? Why is it that they have to be shut off from Brotherhood as pledges, right? So what would make you want to join an organization more than seeing a group of people that authentically care about each other? And so I think in ways like that, incorporate it into your events. Maybe they could have one of your recruitment, themes, your nights, if you do themed nights or different events, have different brothers speak up about, and again, I would prep them before, right? You want to make sure that they're portraying the brand that you want of your chapter. And again, abiding by, I always say risk management because I really do think it's important. It's such a guidebook for success. But have those, have an initial conversation with your Brotherhood, and then come up with a group. And but I also think that is an example of a perfect question that at your first brother meeting you could break people up in groups and ask them that, and have your brothers come up with ideas.
Fantastic. We did actually have one more question sneak through here. It's going to be the last one. So what advice would you give to a new chapter to get the best start on building Brotherhood?
Yeah, that's pretty important. And a new chapter, in some ways, I think it's I'm very biased coming from an old chapter. Alpha Phi was founded in 1926, so we had a lot of history that we were up against. But a new chapter, I think a big thing is, at the beginning of the webinar, we talked about care and what Brotherhood is and service, and making sure that, I believe the definition was that you extend care and concern for someone that you wouldn't normally extend to just any average person. And I think creating that culture, that's the heart of what you're trying to do here. So making sure that the events you're putting on, making sure that how you talk about brothers in meetings, making sure that how you allow brothers to talk to each other during meetings, making sure that respect is at the core there, and then start having these events as a new chapter. Ask the big questions. What are our purpose? What's our purpose? What are our dreams? What programming do we dream of having? Some chapters have consulting. They help consult small businesses, and there are a lot of chapters all over the United States that have programs like that, and they've launched off because they had people with an idea, and that's what will create that that brotherhood is all rallying around one dream or one idea. So just because your problem maybe isn't a heritage of risk management problems, I think you can still make sure to focus on, again, respect and building that within the day-to-day activities, but then rallying behind some new ideas.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel, for all of your great insights. That is all the time that we're going to have for today. I also want to thank all of our participants and callers for your guys' great questions and comments. For any additional follow-up questions or conversation, feel free to contact Rachel with the information that's provided on the screen for you. All right, so finally, we do have additional programs listed on the aksci.org website, as well as supplemental materials and additional resources for you to download at your convenience. If you have any suggestions for future webinar or e-learning topics, please send them to education@aksci.org. Again, I'd like to thank our presenter, Rachel.